The winter wind scraped against the wooden shutters as Emilia Keller held her breath, listening to the rhythmic footsteps marching past the house. The soldiers always came through at this hour. Her father insisted it kept the village disciplined. But tonight the sound felt sharper, closer, more dangerous. Emilia pressed her back to the wall, clutching the small loaf of bread she had stolen from the kitchen. Under the dim candlelight, her hands trembled, and she knew it wasn't from the cold. She turned toward the narrow staircase leading to the attic and whispered, "I'm coming. Just a moment." She pushed the door open and climbed the creaking steps, praying none of the boards betrayed her weight. At the top, she slipped inside the cramped space, closing the door softly behind her. The attic was dark, filled with old crates, dust, and a single thin window that allowed in a slice of moonlight. In the corner, shivering under a moth-eaten blanket, sat a boy no older than 9. His eyes widened with fear until he recognized her silhouette. "Emilia," he whispered, "I heard the boots." "They're just the patrol," she said, forcing her voice to sound steady. "They won't check the house tonight." She wasn't sure if it was true. The boy, Jakob, looked even thinner than he had a week ago. His cheeks were hollow, eyes too large for his face, hair matted from sweat and dust. 6 months in hiding had turned him into a shadow of himself. Emilia knelt beside him and handed him the bread. He grabbed it with cold fingers but didn't bite until she nodded. She watched him eat, each small bite trembling with hunger. "You should eat too," he murmured, but Emilia shook her head. "I'm not hungry." It was a lie. She was starving. But Jakob needed it more. A sudden knock exploded through the house below, 3 sharp blows that made Jakob flinch violently. Emilia froze, breath caught in her throat. Voices followed. Men, her father's voice among them. "Open the door," a stranger commanded. "We have orders to search every home." Emilia's heart hammered as she crawled to the attic window and peeked outside. A black car was parked in the snow. Not regular soldiers. SS. Her father had returned with them. Jakob grabbed her sleeve, eyes filling with terror. "Emilia, please." She cupped his face gently. "Quiet now. Don't make a sound. They won't come up here." But even as she said it, heavy boots thundered across the downstairs hallway. Furniture scraped. Doors slammed. She felt the whole house shake with each intrusion. Her father's voice rose in protest. "I've already been inspected. There's nothing here," the SS officer answered calmly. "Then another inspection will change nothing." Emilia crawled back to Jakob and pressed her finger to her lips. He nodded, burying himself deeper under the blanket. The attic door rattled. Emilia's blood turned to ice. Someone was testing the handle. Then her father spoke sharply from the hallway below. "Leave the attic. It's full of old junk and broken furniture." A tense silence followed. Then the officer replied, "Very well. We move on." Footsteps withdrew. Doors shut. Emilia collapsed back against the wall, trembling uncontrollably. Jakob reached for her hand, small and freezing. She squeezed it tightly. "It's all right," she whispered, though her voice cracked. "They're gone." But as the house grew quiet again, Emilia realized something with a sinking certainty. They weren't safe anymore. Tonight had been too close. The SS had returned. And next time they might not listen to her father. She looked at Jakob, this fragile, terrified boy she had hidden for half a year, and felt the weight of a decision forming in her chest. If she wanted to save him, she would soon have to risk far more than sneaking food or lying to soldiers. She would have to risk everything. Emilia waited nearly an hour before daring to leave the attic. Even then, she moved slowly, listening for any lingering echo of boots or barking orders. When she finally slipped back downstairs, her father was standing in the hallway, hands braced against the table, shoulders shaking with silent anger. He didn't look up when she entered. "They searched every corner," he muttered. "Every drawer, every room. As if I were hiding criminals in my own home." Emilia swallowed hard, the guilt settling like a stone in her chest. "Did they say why?" He turned toward her, his eyes sharp, exhausted. "There was another escape from the ghetto. 2 children went missing. They think someone in the village is sheltering them." Emilia's breath caught. "Do they know who?" "No," he said, rubbing his forehead. "But suspicion is enough. They will return tomorrow." Her stomach twisted painfully. Jakob had been found outside the ghetto months ago, alone, starved, terrified. She had never learned what happened to his family, and she never asked. It didn't matter. He had nowhere else to go. Her father finally lifted his gaze, studying her with an intensity that made her chest tighten. "Emilia, tell me the truth. You've been slipping away at night, taking food, missing chores. Are you involved in something?" Her heartbeat faltered. She forced herself to breathe evenly. "No, Vater, I'm only tired." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push further. Instead, he walked stiffly to the kitchen, muttering about the SS, about injustice, about how the war had turned neighbors into spies. She made him tea, her hands trembling the entire time. When he finally went to bed, Emilia returned to the attic with a small bundle of food, hard bread, an apple, a flask of water. Jakob sat up the moment she entered, wide-eyed, clutching the blanket as if it were armor. "Did they find anything?" "No," she whispered, offering him the apple. "But they'll be back tomorrow." He stared at the floor, voice small. "They know I'm here, don't they?" "They don't," she said quickly. "But they're looking for someone, anyone." Jakob chewed slowly, knees pulled to his chest. "Maybe I should leave." "No." The word left her mouth sharper than she intended. She took a breath. "You step outside, they'll catch you before you reach the river. You saw how many soldiers came tonight. Then what do we do?" She hesitated. She had known this moment would come eventually. The night when hiding wasn't enough anymore. "We need a plan," she murmured. "We can't stay here. My father can't protect us if they decide to search again." Jakob looked terrified but nodded. He trusted her completely, and that trust hit her like a knife. She was all he had. Emilia sat beside him, wrapped her cloak around both of them, and listened to the wind whistle between the rafters. "There is a woman outside the village," she whispered. "A teacher who dislikes the SS more than she fears them. She might help." "Will she take me?" "If anyone would, it's her." Jakob's voice quivered. "When do we go?" Emilia stared at the attic door, imagining the soldiers returning at dawn. "Soon," she answered softly. "Tomorrow night, before the patrol changes." Jakob leaned his head against her shoulder. She stroked his hair gently, realizing how small he truly was. Just a child caught in a world that had lost its humanity. As the candle dimmed, she watched his eyes drift shut, but her own thoughts spiraled darker. The SS officer's voice echoed in her mind. "We search again tomorrow." 6 months of secrecy had protected Jakob so far, but the net was tightening. And if she wanted to save him, she would have to do something she had never dared before. Defy not just the soldiers, but her father. And she knew with a cold certainty settling deep within her that she would. For Jakob, for the belief that even in a world built on cruelty, someone had to choose compassion. Someone had to choose to save the innocent, even if it cost her everything. Emilia barely slept. Every creak of the house felt like a boot step, every gust of wind like a fist pounding the door. When morning finally arrived, pale and brittle as the frost on the windows, she knew she had only hours before the SS returned. She went through her chores mechanically, fetching water, sweeping the steps, slicing bread, always feeling watched even when the street was empty. Her father left early for his duties at the command post, leaving her alone in the house. The moment he was gone, she hurried upstairs to Jakob. He was sitting upright, alert, fear etched into every line of his small face. "Emilia," he whispered before she even spoke. "I heard trucks." She nodded. "They're searching other streets first. We still have time." She handed him a small satchel with food wrapped tightly inside. "Keep this with you. Don't let it fall." Jakob clutched it to his chest. "Will your father stop them?" "No," she said softly. "He can't. Not this time." She knelt and tied the satchel to his waist beneath his shirt, her hands steady despite the pounding of her heart. "Tonight we leave, when the village quiets. But until then, you must not make a sound." Jakob nodded, though his chin trembled. She brushed dust from his hair, trying to smile. "You're brave, Jakob. Braver than anyone I know." The boy blushed faintly. "You're brave too." She wished she believed that. She sat with him for a while, listening to the distant echo of engines and shouted orders. At midday, the knock came, sharp, authoritative. Jakob stiffened instantly. Emilia forced her breath steady and went downstairs. When she opened the door, the same SS officer from the night before stood there, his expression calm but eyes cold and calculating. 2 soldiers flanked him. "Fräulein Keller," he said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "We will conduct a second inspection." Emilia tensed. "I already told you—" "Yes," he interrupted, "but fugitives move, and sometimes they move into places where they are not expected." His gaze drifted slowly across the hallway, pausing on the staircase. Emilia's palms sweated. "Where is your father?" "At the post," she replied. "He will return before sunset." "Good," the officer murmured. "Then he will be pleased to know we are ensuring his house is secure." Without waiting, he motioned to the soldiers. They separated, one heading toward the kitchen, the other toward Emilia's father's study. The officer remained near her, watching her with unsettling intensity. "You seem nervous," he said softly. "Why is that?" Emilia kept her eyes down. "Your visits, they frighten people, Herr Offizier." He smiled thinly. "Fear keeps people honest." Upstairs, a chair scraped across the floor, one of the soldiers searching aggressively. Emilia fought the instinct to flinch. The attic door was closed, but if they tried the handle, if they heard Jakob's breathing, if they saw even a flicker of movement, everything would end. The officer took a step closer. "You know," he said quietly, "we've questioned your neighbors. Some have noticed your nightly walks." Emilia's blood ran cold. "I take evening air. It helps me sleep." "Does it?" he asked, leaning slightly forward. "Or are you meeting someone?" A lump rose in her throat. She forced herself not to look at the ceiling. "There is no one." Silence stretched. Then a shout came from the study. Nothing here!" Another from the kitchen. Clear! The officer's eyes remained on Emilia, scrutinizing her face. Slowly, he walked to the stairs. Her heart slammed against her ribs. One more step, one more. If he climbed, everything would unravel. But instead, he paused halfway up, turned, and descended again. "We will return tomorrow," he said. "Perhaps earlier, perhaps later. These fugitives cannot hide forever." He walked to the door. "Fear not, Fräulein Keller. We will keep this village clean." The soldiers followed him out. When the door finally shut, Emilia waited until the sound of boots faded entirely before collapsing against the wall, shaking. She hurried upstairs. Jakob was sitting exactly where she'd left him, knees pressed to his chest, eyes wide with terror. She knelt beside him, hugging him tightly. "They're coming back," he whispered. "Yes," she said, voice trembling. "Which means tonight is our only chance." Jakob looked up at her, tears gathering in his eyes. "Emilia, will we make it?" She brushed his cheek gently. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we're going to try." And in that fragile, quiet moment, surrounded by the shadows of a house no longer safe, they both understood the truth. There was no turning back now. Tonight they would run, or they would be found. Night fell slowly, as if the sky itself feared what darkness would bring. Emilia watched from the attic window as the last patrol marched past the square. Their silhouettes stretched long across the snow. The village seemed still, almost peaceful, but she knew better. Peace in wartime was only the silence between storms. When the final lantern dimmed in the distance, she turned to Jakob. "It's time." He rose shakily, clutching the small satchel beneath his shirt. His eyes were enormous in the candlelight, full of fear but also trust. Trust that weighed on Emilia more heavily than any threat outside. She wrapped him in her old winter coat, far too big for him, then pulled a wool scarf around his chin. "Stay close. Do exactly as I say." Jakob nodded. Emilia opened the attic door, wincing as it creaked. Every sound felt amplified in the quiet night. They descended the stairs one step at a time, pausing whenever the house groaned under its own weight. Her father's room was silent. He had always slept deeply after long days at the post. Emilia held her breath as she passed his door, praying he wouldn't wake. Not because she feared punishment, but because she feared the heartbreak in his eyes if he learned she had lied to him for half a year. They reached the back door. Emilia slowly turned the latch, letting in a cutting wave of cold air. The snow outside glittered under the moon like shards of glass. They stepped into the garden, their footprints sharp and bright. Emilia pulled Jakob behind a row of wood piles as she scanned the village. No movement, no shadows. Only the distant hum of generators and the low whistle of the wind weaving through chimneys. They moved quickly through alleys, ducking behind fences, slipping between tool sheds and firewood stacks. Emilia knew every hidden path, every shortcut children took to avoid school, every side lane where gossiping neighbors rarely looked. They reached the outskirts within minutes, the cottages giving way to dark fields shrouded in frost. Jakob tugged her sleeve, whispering, "Emilia, what if they hear us?" "They won't," she whispered back. "Just keep your feet light." But her confidence faltered when a dog barked in the distance, then another. The sound spread like ripples in water, first faint, then harsh, then unmistakably close. Jakob stiffened. "They're starting patrol again," Emilia breathed. "Faster." They hurried along the frozen path leading toward the teacher's house, the trees looming like black pillars against the sky. The house sat alone at the edge of the woods, its roof sagging under the weight of snow. A single candle glowed faintly behind a curtain. Relief flooded Emilia's chest. "She's awake," she whispered. "She'll help us." But as they approached, Jakob stumbled, grabbing her arm. "Emilia." She followed his gaze and froze. A dark silhouette moved across the window, then another, not the teacher. Soldiers. Emilia's breath shattered. She pulled Jakob back behind a cluster of trees. Through the branches, she watched as 2 German soldiers rummaged through the house, throwing furniture aside, smashing cupboards. A 3rd soldier stood outside, smoking, rifle in hand. "They were here first," she whispered. "Someone must have told them she helped the ghetto children." Jakob's lip trembled. "What do we do?" Emilia didn't know. Their only safe destination had turned into a trap. The barking grew louder again, closer, angrier. The soldiers at the house paused, listening. One shouted something toward the forest, pointing in their direction. Panic surged through Emilia. She grabbed Jakob's hand. "Run!" They sprinted into the woods, branches slapping against their coats, snow crushing beneath their boots. The dogs exploded into full pursuit, their snarls slicing the darkness. Flashlights flickered behind them as soldiers crashed through the underbrush. Jakob stumbled but kept going, breath coming in quick, terrified gasps. "Emilia, I can't." "You can," she urged, tightening her grip, "just a little further." She knew of an old hunting cabin deeper in the forest, abandoned for years. If they could reach it, if they could hide until dawn, maybe they had a chance. But the dogs were closing in. One bark grew so near, Jakob screamed. Emilia stopped abruptly, shoving Jakob behind a fallen tree. "Stay down," she whispered fiercely, "and don't move, don't breathe." He shook his head violently, tears streaking his cheeks. Emilia cupped his face. "Listen to me, I will lead them away." "No, no, Emilia. If they find you, they take you. If they catch me." She forced a small, trembling smile. "I can lie. You can't." Jakob clutched her coat, refusing to let go. "Please don't leave me." Emilia's heart broke cleanly. "I have to. I promise I'll come back for you." She pried his fingers loose, tucked him deeper under the branches, and covered him with leaves and snow until he disappeared into the forest floor. Then she rose, took one breath, and ran, purposefully crashing through branches, making noise, drawing every dog, every soldier toward her. Behind her, the forest erupted with pursuit. Boots thundered, dogs snarled, flashlights slashed across the trees. Emilia didn't look back. She couldn't bear to. All she could do was run, praying her footsteps bought Jakob the time he needed to survive the night. Emilia's lungs burned as she pushed deeper into the woods, branches tearing at her coat, cold air cutting her throat with every gasp. Behind her, the forest roared with pursuit, shouting soldiers, snarling dogs, snapping twigs under heavy boots. She forced herself to stumble noisily, to break branches, to leave a trail even a blind man could follow. Jakob needed distance. He needed silence. He needed her to be loud enough to drown him out. A dog barked so close she felt the vibration through the ground. She swerved hard to the left, leaping over a fallen trunk, her legs trembling. She didn't dare slow. She didn't dare think. But the forest suddenly opened into a clearing, wide, pale, merciless under the moon. No cover, no shadows, nowhere to hide. She hesitated only a fraction of a second before sprinting across it. A shot cracked behind her. Snow exploded near her feet. Another shot. Another. She stumbled but kept running. The other side of the clearing was only 20 meters away. 10, 5. A voice cut the air like a blade. Halt! A beam of light pinned her in place. The dogs lunged forward, but the soldier held them back with a sharp command. 2 more soldiers burst through the trees, rifles raised. Emilia froze, chest heaving, arms limp at her sides. One soldier approached her, breathing hard, sweat freezing on his brow. "Why are you running?" he demanded. She said nothing, forcing her expression blank. If she said the wrong word, Jakob's life was over. A familiar voice emerged from the darkness, calm, cold, certain. "Fräulein Keller?" She shut her eyes. The SS officer stepped into the clearing, lantern in hand, its light catching on the snow and steel in his gaze. "We meet again," he said softly, "and always at the most interesting moments." Emilia didn't move. The officer circled her slowly, studying her face as though it were a puzzle he'd been waiting to solve. "Running through the woods at night," he mused. "No coat, no weapon, no explanation." He stopped in front of her. "Who were you leading us away from?" Her breath hitched, but she didn't look toward Jakob's hiding place. She kept her eyes locked on the officers. "I wasn't leading you," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I was running from you." "And why would you run?" he asked. "If you have nothing to hide." She stared at him, jaw tight. "Because your men terrify everyone in this village." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Including women who sneak food at night?" Her heart lurched. "I feed my father," she lied. "He barely eats." "Your neighbors say they see you carrying bags, small ones, too small for a grown man." He leaned closer. "Are you feeding rats, Fräulein Keller?" Emilia didn't flinch. "Maybe I am." The officer watched her for a long, tense moment. Then he sighed, almost disappointed. "Search the area," he ordered. "Spread out. We know one child is near." Panic surged through her. She stepped forward. "There's no one else here." "We will decide that," he replied. Soldiers and dogs scattered into the forest, lanterns swinging like restless fireflies. Emilia clenched her fists. The officer studied her again, then spoke almost gently. "You are young, foolish, loyal to the wrong things. You still have a chance to help yourself." She didn't respond. His voice hardened. "If you're hiding the boy and we find him, you will hang beside him. Do you understand?" A single tear escaped despite her will. The officer reached out and brushed it away with his gloved thumb. "Fear makes people honest," he whispered. "But silence," his smile thinned. "Silence tells me everything." Before she could answer, shouts echoed from the woods. "Herr Offizier! Footprints! Small ones!" The officer's eyes lit with triumph. "There it is," he murmured. "The truth." Emilia's breath shattered. "No, please, he's just a child." "A fugitive," the officer corrected. "And anyone who protects him is worse." He motioned to 2 soldiers. "Take her!" They seized her arms roughly. She didn't fight. Fighting would only drag them closer to Jakob. As they forced her back toward the village, the forest swallowed the shouts of soldiers following the small footprints. She prayed they would lose the trail. She prayed the snow and wind had masked Jakob's hiding place. She prayed this sacrifice was enough. When they reached the edge of the trees, the officer walked beside her, his expression unreadable. "I warned you," he said quietly. "Mercy is treason in times like these." Emilia lifted her chin, tears streaking her cold cheeks. Then I choose treason." For the first time, the officer's face flickered with something like respect or disbelief. But the moment passed. The soldiers pushed her forward, their boots crunching rhythmically on the snow as they led her toward the black car waiting like a funeral carriage. Emilia did not look back at the forest. If she did, she would break. Instead, she imagined Jakob buried safely beneath the branches, holding his breath, waiting for her return. She prayed he would understand why she wouldn't. And somewhere deep in the woods, a small boy lay hidden beneath the snow, listening to the dogs grow farther and farther away, never knowing that the girl who saved him had just given up her life to ensure he would keep his.